Yeah, I think there's a higher chance now of some kind of staged event or false flag than at any point, because all of the other military options have been expended. I was actually in a debate on CGTN with one of the main kind of Ukrainian influencers, who's a hardline parliamentarian, Ina Sobson. And when I heard her say that we are expecting a chemical attack, that's when I knew. And then I started to see this narrative get rolled out by all of the Biden proxies and the Newland proxies about biological weapons, false flag by Russia. It became clear they were preparing for something, along with all the censorship and the attacks on Tucker Carlson, for actually, because he would be the one person with a national audience to push back on another Duma-style incident. So it really does feel like all the signals are blinking red, as Mitt Romney's former advisor, Kofor Black, who went on to work for Burisma, said days before 9/11. Now, on if you want to add anything to that, feel free. But I wanted to ask you about another issue. There was a cruise missile attack on the Yavoriv base, which is just east of Poland, inside Ukrainian territory, and it's known as this kind of international peacekeeping center. It was home to mercenaries and Redditors who were coming because they were bored with their lives as computer programmers to participate in a war they thought was going very well for Ukraine. Let me just throw up on screen some of the testimony from one of the people who was a witness to that attack, who was a U.S. medic who wanted to be a combat medic. And, you know, this is from one of the Reddit chats. You weren't expecting missiles at a war? No, just not at that base at that particular time. Shit surprised us, including the Ukrainians. And then he gets called an idiot. And then he refers to the volunteers who have come in from around the country as cannon fodder, you know, basically being bodies shoveled in front of the Russians. He called the Ukrainian commanders crazy, and so on. And then they all turned tail and ran home. At least 35 foreigners are dead. It could be as many as 200, but that seems to be the end of the Ukrainian Foreign Legion. But my question is not only about that, but about this wider issue of that base being there and having hosted many NATO training sessions. Could there have even been NATO trainers who were hit in that attack? And can you address this concept of the NATOization of Ukraine? I mean, most Americans think Ukraine has not been formally admitted into NATO. However, we hear from the Russian side that it effectively has been NATOized. What do you know about this base, and what about this wider concept of NATOization?
Well, the NATOization has occurred, and this is one of the reasons why when people say the probability that Ukraine would be admitted to NATO was always low for all the usual reasons, the lack of human rights standards, the lack of true democratic elections, the overwhelming corruption, and so forth. The problem with that is that the Russians have watched carefully at how rapidly we are willing to waive things in order to get new members into the alliance. And I think they concluded that regardless of what the true circumstances were, this NATOization had reached a point where if Russia did not firmly object and demonstrate its opposition, that Ukraine would be admitted. So I think the NATOization argument is very true. And that's one of the reasons we got large numbers of people out of there as quickly as possible when it became clear that the Russians were going to intervene. We didn't want hundreds of our advisors and so forth captured by the Russians. So yes, the place is NATOized, that's true. But NATOization is really US-led, and we tend to drag other NATO's members with us. The British are there because they tend to be fellow travelers with us. And like us, they don't live on the continent. So if things really go badly, just like the United States, the British will simply go home to the island. This is why large numbers of Europeans dislike them intensely and don't trust them. So yeah, that's very much the case. There's something else though at work here, and that is that Putin wanted to demonstrate, and I'm sure he gave permission for this strike, because I don't think any operations west of the Dnieper happened without his authorization, because I know that in the original thinking, there was no desire to press west beyond the Dnieper River. I mean, that's the heart of Ukraine. The people that live there really are Ukrainian in language, culture, and so forth. Doesn't want to go there. And I think what he did is he said, yes, we'll do this because we need to show these people that we can reach out and touch them anywhere in Ukraine. This happened to be very close to the Polish border, so it had a double message. It was a message to the Poles that if you continue to provide support to the Ukrainians, and if you try to widen and escalate this war, you too will become a co-belligerent. And the Ukraine and the West, the Poles don't want that. They know that.